The Omaha skyline loomed before me as I navigated the bustling streets, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. I'd thought I'd seen it all in the publishing world. But here I was, Margaret Holloway, best-selling author, feeling like a nervous debutante on her way to meet her new editor. I'd heard whispers about Ellie Sinclair, brilliant, ruthless, and with an eye for detail that could make or break a writer's career. As I pulled into the parking lot of Heartland Publishing, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. My ash-blonde hair was pulled back in a sensible bun, and I'd opted for a conservative black blazer over a crisp white blouse. Professional, collected, at least on the outside. The elevator ride to the TH floor felt eternal. I clutched my manuscript to my chest like a shield, rehearsing my pitch in my head. The doors slid open, revealing a sleek reception area bathed in soft, warm light. "Miss Holloway." A young assistant greeted me with a smile. "Miss Sinclair is ready for you, right this way." I followed her down a corridor lined with framed book covers, some of which I recognized as New York Times bestsellers. My steps faltered as we approached a frosted glass door. This was it. The assistant knocked and opened the door. "Miss Sinclair, Margaret Holloway is here to see you." I stepped into the office, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Ellie Sinclair was nothing like I'd imagined. She stood behind her desk, a vision in a tailored navy suit that accentuated every curve. Her wavy auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that could have graced magazine covers. But it was her eyes that captured me, piercing green, intelligent, and somehow both warm and calculating at the same time. "Margaret," she said, her voice a rich contralto that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." She extended her hand, and as our fingers touched, I felt a jolt of electricity that nearly made me drop my manuscript. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Please have a seat," Ellie said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. As I sat down, I couldn't help but notice the graceful way she moved, like a dancer in perfect control of her body. "So," she began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me about this new novel of yours. I've read the synopsis, but I want to hear it in your words." I launched into my carefully prepared pitch, but as I spoke, I found myself stumbling over words, distracted by the intensity of Ellie's gaze. She listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes with long, elegant fingers that I couldn't seem to tear my eyes away from. "Interesting," she murmured when I finished. "You've taken some risks with this one, haven't you? It's quite a departure from your usual style." I nodded, suddenly feeling exposed. I wanted to challenge myself, to push beyond my comfort zone. A smile played at the corners of Ellie's lips. "I like that. Too many writers get complacent. But you're not afraid to explore new territory, are you, Margaret?" The way she said my name sent a flush of heat through my body. I shifted in my seat, acutely aware of a tension in the room that had nothing to do with literary criticism. For the next hour, we delved into the manuscript, discussing plot points and character arcs. Ellie's insights were razor-sharp, cutting through to the heart of the story in ways I hadn't even considered. But more than that, I found myself drawn to her passion, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about a particularly compelling scene. As our meeting drew to a close, Ellie stood and walked around her desk. She perched on the edge, closer to me than strictly necessary. "I think we're going to work well together, Margaret," she said softly. "I have a feeling this book could be something special." I stood, suddenly aware of how close we were. The scent of her perfume, something subtle and spicy, enveloped me. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice sounding strangely husky to my own ears. "I'm looking forward to it." As I turned to leave, Ellie's hand brushed against my arm. "Oh, and Margaret," I looked back, caught once again in those mesmerizing green eyes. "Don't be afraid to let your characters surprise you. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most satisfying destinations." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I walked out of her office, my mind was reeling. I'd come here prepared to discuss my book, but instead I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. One thing was certain, working with Ellie Sinclair was going to be an adventure I never saw coming. The weeks following my first meeting with Ellie flew by in a whirlwind of rewrites and late-night phone calls. We maintained a strictly professional relationship, but with each interaction, I found myself more drawn to her. Her brilliant mind, her quick wit, and yes, her undeniable beauty. I tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand, but every time we met, every time her hand accidentally brushed mine as we pored over manuscript pages, I felt that same electric jolt I'd experienced in her office that first day. It was during one of our marathon editing sessions that things began to shift. The Heartland Publishing office was deserted. The sky outside Ellie's window had long since darkened. We'd been working for hours, fueled by takeout and determination. "I think we've cracked it," Ellie said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smile. "This chapter is really singing now." I nodded, rubbing my tired eyes. "It's all thanks to you. Your insights are, well, they're incredible." Ellie's eyes softened. "Don't sell yourself short, Margaret. This is your story. I'm just here to help you polish it until it shines." She stood up, stretching her arms above her head. The movement caused her blouse to ride up slightly, revealing a sliver of pale skin. I quickly averted my eyes, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "We should celebrate," Ellie declared. "I think I have a bottle of wine stashed away somewhere." Before I could protest, she was rummaging in a cabinet, emerging triumphantly with a bottle of red and 2 glasses. As she poured, I found myself admiring the graceful curve of her neck, the way her auburn hair caught the light. "Two unexpected journeys," Ellie said, raising her glass. Our eyes met over the rim of our wine glasses, and I felt that familiar spark ignite between us. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily from literature to life, our laughter echoing in the empty office. As the night wore on, we found ourselves sitting closer together on the small couch in her office. I was acutely aware of every movement, every brush of her arm against mine. "You know," Ellie said softly, her eyes shining in the dim light, "when I first read your manuscript, I knew there was something special about you. But I had no idea." She trailed off, her gaze dropping to my lips. The air between us seemed to crackle with tension. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we leaned towards each other. Just as I felt the warmth of her breath on my cheek, a janitor's cart clattered in the hallway outside. We jumped apart, the spell broken. I should go," I stammered, gathering my things with shaking hands. "It's late, and we both have early meetings tomorrow." Ellie nodded, a mix of disappointment and understanding in her eyes. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow, Margaret." As I hurried out of the office and into the cool night air, my mind was reeling. What had almost happened? And more importantly, why did I want it to happen so badly? The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. I found myself making excuses to avoid Ellie, rescheduling meetings and communicating via email instead of in person. But even as I tried to distance myself, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Ellie, my heart raced. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, felt the phantom touch of her hand on mine. It was maddening, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. I threw myself into my writing, channeling all of my confused emotions into my characters. The manuscript was evolving, becoming deeper and more complex than I'd ever imagined. But at what cost? Late one night, as I sat at my desk, staring at a blinking cursor, my phone lit up with a message from Ellie. "Is everything okay? I feel like you've been avoiding me. If I've done something to upset you, please tell me." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keys. How could I explain what I was feeling when I barely understood it myself? How could I tell her that her mere presence was enough to make me question everything I thought I knew about myself? After what felt like an eternity, I typed out a response. I'm fine. Just busy with rewrites. We'll talk soon. As I hit send, I felt a pang of guilt. I was pushing her away, and I knew it. But I didn't know how to bridge the gap between what I was feeling and what I was ready to admit to myself, let alone to her. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I made a decision. I couldn't keep running from these feelings. Whatever was happening between Ellie and me, whatever this connection was, I needed to face it head on. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow, I would stop avoiding her. Tomorrow, I would look into those captivating green eyes and what, I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't keep hiding. The story of us, whatever it might be, was waiting to be written. And, like any good writer, I had to be brave enough to put pen to paper and see where it might lead. The morning I decided to confront my feelings for Ellie, my world decided to throw me a curveball. As I was sipping my morning coffee, steeling myself for the conversation ahead, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Jack, my ex-husband. Margaret, his voice was sickly sweet, a tone I knew all too well. It meant trouble. We need to talk about your new book deal. I felt the blood drain from my face. What are you talking about, Jack? We've been divorced for 3 years. You have no claim on my work. His laughter sent a chill down my spine. Oh, but I do. Remember all those late nights I spent listening to your ideas? The feedback I gave you? I was practically your CO author. The argument that ensued left me shaking with anger and fear. Jack was threatening to sue for a share of my royalties, claiming he had contributed significantly to my success. It was ridiculous, of course, but I knew Jack. He was tenacious and had a good lawyer. In a daze, I called Ellie to cancel our meeting. But as soon as I heard her voice, something in me crumbled. Ellie, I choked out. I need help. An hour later, I found myself in her office, pouring out the whole sordid story. Ellie listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, she leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with determination. We're not going to let him get away with this, Margaret, she said firmly. I know some excellent lawyers who specialize in intellectual property. We'll fight this together. The way she said, "we," made my heart skip a beat. Despite the circumstances, I felt a warmth spreading through me. Ellie wasn't just my editor anymore, she was my ally, my champion. Over the next few weeks, Ellie and I worked closely to build a case against Jack's claims. We spent long hours poring over old manuscripts, emails, and notes, looking for evidence to prove that my ideas were my own. During one particularly late night, as we sat surrounded by papers in my living room, Ellie looked up at me with a soft smile. You know, in a weird way, I'm almost grateful to your ex, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Grateful? To that snake? She laughed, the sound sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. Well, if it weren't for him, we might not have gotten to know each other like this. She gestured to the intimate scene around us, take-out containers, coffee mugs, and the two of us in comfortable clothes, shoes kicked off. I felt a blush creep up my neck. I suppose you're right, I admitted. Though I wish it had happened under better circumstances. Ellie's gaze softened. Margaret, she said quietly, I hope you know that I'm here for you, not just as your editor but as a friend. Maybe even. She trailed off, her eyes searching mine. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been both dreading and longing for. I took a deep breath. Ellie, But before I could finish, my phone buzzed loudly, breaking the spell. It was an email from Jack's lawyer, demanding a meeting. I groaned, the weight of reality crashing back down on me. Ellie squeezed my hand reassuringly. We'll get through this, she promised. Together. As the legal battle intensified, so did my feelings for Ellie. She was my rock, offering not just professional advice but emotional support as well. We spent more and more time together, and with each passing day, the line between professional and personal blurred further. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting with the lawyers, Ellie suggested we take a walk to clear our heads. As we strolled through a nearby park, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I found myself opening up to her in a way I never had before. I told her about my marriage to Jack, how he had slowly chipped away at my confidence over the years, how writing had been my escape, my salvation, and how, since our divorce, I'd been afraid to let anyone get close again. Ellie listened attentively, her hand occasionally brushing against mine as we walked. When I finished, she stopped and turned to face me. "Margaret," she said softly, "you're one of the strongest, most talented women I've ever met. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself ever again." There was something in her eyes, a warmth and understanding that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. Without thinking, I leaned in, my lips barely brushing against hers. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, as if waking from a dream, I pulled back, my eyes wide with shock at my own boldness. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I shouldn't have." But Ellie silenced me with a gentle finger on my lips. "Don't apologize," she whispered. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks." As we stood there, the last rays of sunlight fading around us, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. Yes, there were still challenges ahead, the lawsuit, the complications of our professional relationship, but in that moment, with Ellie's hand in mine, I felt ready to face whatever came our way. Little did I know, the journey ahead would test us in ways neither of us could have imagined, but as we walked back to my apartment hand in hand, I allowed myself to hope, to dream, to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had found something truly special. The weeks following our kiss in the park were a delicate dance of stolen glances and lingering touches. Ellie and I tried to maintain a veneer of professionalism, but the undercurrent of tension between us was impossible to ignore. Every editorial meeting felt charged with unspoken desires, every casual interaction a carefully choreographed performance of restraint. It was in this state of exquisite anticipation that I received an invitation to the Heartland Literary Gala, an annual event celebrating the best in Midwestern literature. Normally I'd dread such affairs, but this year was different. This year, Ellie would be there. The night of the gala arrived, and I found myself standing before my mirror, scrutinizing my reflection. I'd chosen a deep burgundy dress that hugged my curves in a way that was subtle yet alluring. As I fastened a delicate silver necklace around my neck, I couldn't help but wonder what Ellie would think. The ballroom was a sea of glittering lights and polite conversation when I arrived. I scanned the crowd, my heart quickening as I searched for that familiar flash of auburn hair. And then, suddenly, there she was. Ellie stood across the room, radiant in a sleek black gown that left one shoulder bare. Our eyes met, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away. She made her way towards me, navigating through the crowd with graceful determination. "Margaret," she breathed as she reached me, her green eyes sparkling. "You look stunning." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "So do you," I managed, hyper-aware of how close we were standing. The evening passed in a blur of champagne flutes and literary small talk. But through it all, Ellie was a constant presence at my side. We moved through the crowd as a unit, her hand occasionally brushing against the small of my back, sending shivers up my spine. As the night wore on, we found ourselves on a secluded balcony, the sounds of the gala muffled behind us. The moon hung low and full in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the city below. "I've been wanting to get you alone all night," Ellie said softly, turning to face me. The moonlight caught in her hair, making it shimmer like spun copper. I took a step closer, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. "Have you now?" I teased, feeling bolder than I had in years. Ellie's hand came up to cup my cheek, her thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Margaret," she whispered, "I can't pretend anymore. I'm falling for you, hard and fast, and it terrifies me." My heart soared at her words. "I'm scared too," I admitted, "but I've never felt this way about anyone before. Not even." Jack, Ellie supplied, a hint of worry creasing her brow. I shook my head. Especially not Jack. What I feel for you, Ellie. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. And then, finally, gloriously, we were kissing. Her lips were soft against mine, tasting of champagne and possibility. I wound my arms around her neck, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. It was everything I'd been dreaming of and more. When we finally parted, both breathless and flushed, Ellie rested her forehead against mine. "Come home with me," she murmured. The ride to my apartment was charged with electric anticipation. We sat close in the back of the taxi, our fingers intertwined, stealing glances at each other like lovesick teenagers. As soon as the door closed behind us, we were in each other's arms again. Ellie pressed me against the wall, her kisses hungry and insistent. I ran my hands down her sides, reveling in the feel of her body against mine. "Are you sure about this?" Ellie asked, pulling back slightly to search my eyes. In response, I reached behind me and slowly lowered the zipper of my dress, letting it pull at my feet. Ellie's eyes widened, taking in the sight of me in my orange soft velvet lingerie. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said, my voice husky with desire. What followed was a night of passionate exploration and tender discoveries. Ellie's touch was both gentle and demanding, igniting sensations I'd long forgotten I was capable of feeling. We mapped each other's bodies with reverent hands and eager lips, learning the landscapes of our desires. In the quiet moments between our lovemaking, we talked about our fears, our hopes, the complications that lay ahead. But in the cocoon of my bedroom, with Ellie's arms around me, those worries seemed distant and manageable. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, I propped myself up on an elbow, gazing down at Ellie's sleeping form. Her hair was tousled, her lips slightly parted, and I was struck by how beautiful she looked in repose. I traced a finger lightly over the freckles dusting her shoulders, marveling at the softness of her skin. As if sensing my touch, Ellie's eyes fluttered open, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Good morning," she murmured, pulling me down for a lazy kiss. "Good morning," I replied, my heart full to bursting. As we lay there, tangled in sheets in each other, I knew that everything had changed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jack's lawsuit, the complications of our professional relationship, we would face them together. For the first time in years, I felt truly, completely alive. And as Ellie pulled me close for another kiss, I knew that this was just the beginning of our story. The soft morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains, casting a warm glow over Ellie's sleeping form. I found myself mesmerized by the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the way her auburn hair splayed across my pillow like a halo of fire. As my eyes traced the constellation of freckles on her shoulders, I was struck by the surreal beauty of the moment. Ellie stirred, her green eyes fluttering open to meet mine. A slow, sleepy smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. I leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "Good morning," I whispered back, marveling at how natural this felt, how right. As we lay there, tangled in sheets and each other, the reality of our situation began to creep in. The magic of the night before gave way to the harsh light of day, and with it came a host of complications we couldn't ignore. "Ellie," I said softly, tracing patterns on her bare arm, "what are we doing?" She propped herself up on an elbow, her gaze intense. "What do you mean?" I sighed, struggling to put my swirling thoughts into words. "This us. You're my editor. I'm in the middle of a legal battle with my ex-husband. It's complicated," Ellie finished for me, a wry smile tugging at her lips. I nodded, grateful she understood. "I don't regret last night," I hurried to add, "not for a second. But I can't help wondering what this means for us professionally." Ellie was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally she spoke. "I won't lie, Margaret. This isn't going to be easy. There are ethical considerations, potential conflicts of interest. But she reached out, cupping my face in her hand. I'm not willing to give this up. Give us up. We'll figure it out. Her words sent a rush of warmth through me. I leaned into her touch, turning to press a kiss to her palm. I'm not willing to give this up either, I admitted. But we need to be careful, at least for now. We spent the morning talking, planning, stealing kisses between serious discussions about how to navigate our new reality. We agreed to keep our relationship discreet, at least until the situation with Jack was resolved. It wouldn't be easy, but the alternative, not being together, was unthinkable. As Ellie dressed to leave, casting regretful glances at the rumpled bed, I felt a pang of longing. I wish you could stay, I said, wrapping my arms around her from behind. She turned in my embrace, pressing a lingering kiss to my lips. Me too, she murmured. But we both have work to do. Your manuscript won't edit itself, you know. I laughed, swatting her playfully. Always the editor, aren't you? Her eyes twinkled with mischief. Always. But now I have some extra motivation to make your book a bestseller. With one last kiss, she was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the lingering scent of her perfume on my sheets. The next few weeks were a delicate balancing act. At work, we maintained a facade of strict professionalism, our interactions coolly cordial. But behind closed doors, stolen moments in empty conference rooms or late-night editing sessions at my apartment, we let our true feelings show. Every touch, every kiss felt electric, charged with the thrill of our secret. But it wasn't just physical attraction that drew us together. Our intellectual connection deepened as we worked on my manuscript, Ellie's insightful comments pushing me to new creative heights. One evening, as we pored over a particularly tricky chapter in my study, I found myself more distracted by Ellie than the words on the page. She was perched on the edge of my desk, her brow furrowed in concentration as she made notes. A strand of hair had escaped her usually impeccable bun, and I longed to tuck it behind her ear. As if sensing my gaze, Ellie looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "See something you like, Miss Holloway?" she teased. In response, I stood, closing the distance between us in 2 steps. I brushed the errant strand of hair away, letting my fingers linger on her cheek. "You have no idea," I murmured, before capturing her lips in a searing kiss. The manuscript lay forgotten as we lost ourselves in each other, the passion we'd been suppressing all day finally finding release. Later, as we lay tangled together on the small sofa in my study, Ellie traced lazy patterns on my bare skin. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think this chapter is some of your best work yet. There's a rawness and honesty to it that wasn't there before." I chuckled, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "I wonder why that could be." She smirked, pulling me closer. "I'd like to think I'm a positive influence on your writing process." As the weeks passed, I found myself falling deeper in love with Ellie. It wasn't just the excitement of a new relationship. It was a profound connection that seemed to touch every aspect of my life. My writing flourished, infused with a passion and depth I'd never achieved before. But even as our personal relationship blossomed, the specter of Jack's lawsuit loomed large. Each day brought new challenges, new stresses. Ellie was my rock through it all, offering unwavering support and brilliant legal strategies. Yet, as we navigated this complex web of personal and professional entanglements, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking a tightrope. One misstep, one whispered rumor, and everything we built could come crashing down. Still, as I lay in Ellie's arms each night, listening to the steady beat of her heart, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our story was just beginning, and I was determined to see it through to a happy ending. The Heartland Publishing office buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy, but as I stepped off the elevator, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Whispered conversations ceased abruptly as I passed, replaced by overly bright smiles and stilted greetings. My stomach nodded with unease. I made my way to my temporary office, a small space I'd been using during the intensive editing process. As I rounded the corner, I nearly collided with Tom from marketing. "Oh, Margaret," he exclaimed, his voice a touch too loud. "Just the person I was looking for. Great news about your book's pre-orders." I forced a smile, noting the way his eyes darted nervously over my shoulder. "That's wonderful, Tom. We'll catch up later, okay?" Shutting my office door behind me, I leaned against it, taking a deep breath. Something was off, and I had a sinking feeling I knew what it was. A soft knock startled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called, straightening up. Ellie slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. Her face was pale, her usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "Margaret," she said softly, "we need to talk." My heart sank. "They know, don't they?" Ellie nodded, running a hand through her hair. "There are rumors, nothing concrete, but people are talking." I sank into my chair, mind racing. "How? We've been so careful." "I don't know," Ellie sighed, perching on the edge of my desk. "Maybe someone saw us at the gala, or leaving the office together late at night. It doesn't matter now. We need to decide how to handle this." As we discussed our options in hushed tones, my phone buzzed insistently. I glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. "It's Jack's lawyer," I whispered. Ellie's eyes widened. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." With trembling fingers, I accepted the call. The lawyer's voice filled the small office, smug and self-satisfied. "Miss Holloway, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Or anyone. We've come into some rather interesting information about your, shall we say, extracurricular activities with your editor." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Ellie reached for my hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "I'm not sure what you're implying," I managed to say, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm implying," the lawyer chuckled. "Mr. Holloway is prepared to be very generous in light of this new development. We can settle this whole unfortunate business quietly, provided you're willing to be equally accommodating." The call ended, leaving us in stunned silence. Ellie was the first to speak, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "That manipulative bastard. He's trying to blackmail you." I nodded, feeling numb. "What are we going to do?" Ellie stood, pacing the small office. "We fight," she said firmly. "We're not going to let Jack or anyone else dictate our lives or our relationship." Her words sparked something in me, a flame of defiance cutting through the fog of fear. "You're right," I said, standing to join her. "No more hiding." We spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of activity. Meetings with HR, conversations with the head of the publishing house, frantic calls to our legal team. By the end of it, we were exhausted but resolute. As we left the office that evening, Ellie took my hand openly, ignoring the stares of our colleagues. "Come home with me," she said softly. Her apartment was a haven of calm after the storm of the day. As soon as the door closed behind us, Ellie pulled me into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry," she murmured into my hair. "This is all my fault." I pulled back, cupping her face in my hands. "Don't you dare apologize. We're in this together, remember?" Her eyes softened, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Together," she agreed, leaning in to kiss me. What started as a gentle reassurance quickly ignited into something more urgent. Months of pent-up passion and the day's stress fueled our actions as we stumbled towards the bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. Ellie pressed me against the wall, her kisses trailing fire down my neck. I gasped as her hands found my breasts, teasing and caressing. "Ellie," I breathed, "I need you." She smiled against my skin, her hand sliding lower. "Tell me what you want, Margaret," she murmured, her fingers dancing along the edge of my underwear. "You," I managed, my hips arching towards her touch. "All of you." What followed was a symphony of sighs and moans, of skin against skin and whispered endearments. We explored each other with a newfound freedom, no longer constrained by secrecy or fear of discovery. As we lay tangled together afterward, pleasantly exhausted, I traced lazy patterns on Ellie's bare shoulder. "What happens now?" I asked softly. Ellie propped herself up on an elbow, her gaze intense. "Now, we face whatever comes our way. Together." I nodded, feeling a surge of love and gratitude for this incredible woman. "Together," I echoed. We spent the rest of the night talking, planning our next moves. We knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be professional consequences to navigate, Jack's threats to counter, and public scrutiny to endure. But as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them. Our love, born in the pages of a manuscript and nurtured in stolen moments, had blossomed into something strong and enduring. As Ellie drifted off to sleep in my arms, I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but for now, in this quiet moment, everything was perfect. Little did I know, the biggest test of our relationship was yet to come. The morning after our night of passionate revelations, Ellie and I walked into Heartland Publishing hand in hand, heads held high. The office fell silent as we passed, a sea of wide eyes and dropped jaws in our wake. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump. We'd barely made it to my office when Sandra, the head of HR, appeared in the doorway. Her face was a mask of professional neutrality, but I could see the strain around her eyes. "Margaret, Ellie, we need to talk. Now." The next few hours were a blur of meetings, explanations, and thinly veiled accusations. Words like conflict of interest and breach of ethics were thrown around like confetti. Through it all, Ellie remained a pillar of strength beside me, her hand a reassuring presence in mine. By the end of the day, we'd been temporarily reassigned. Ellie was moved to a different department, and I was given a new editor to finish my book. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than the alternatives we'd feared. As we left the building that evening, exhausted but relieved, Ellie turned to me with a wry smile. "Well, that could have gone worse." I laughed, the sound slightly hysterical even to my own ears. "I suppose so. At least we still have our jobs, for now." But our momentary relief was short-lived. The next morning I woke to a flurry of notifications on my phone. Somehow, news of our relationship had leaked to the press. The headlines were sensational: best-selling author's steamy affair with editor, love and literature, the scandal rocking Heartland Publishing. I felt sick as I scrolled through the articles, each one more lurid than the last. They painted our relationship as tawdry and unprofessional, questioning the integrity of my work and Ellie's editorial decisions. Ellie arrived at my apartment an hour later, her face pale but determined. "We'll get through this," she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "We just need to weather the storm." But the storm was relentless. Over the next few days, we were hounded by reporters, our phones ringing constantly with calls from friends, family, and vulturous journalists looking for a scoop. Even a quick run to the grocery store became an ordeal, with paparazzi lurking behind every shelf. The professional fallout was equally brutal. Several authors threatened to pull their books from Heartland, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. My own book's release date was pushed back indefinitely as the publishing house scrambled to do damage control. Through it all, Ellie remained my rock, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. The sparkle in her green eyes dimmed, replaced by a weary resignation. One night, as we lay in bed, the weight of the world pressing down on us, she turned to me with a vulnerable expression I'd never seen before. "Margaret," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Are we doing the right thing? Is this worth it?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. I sat up, my heart pounding. "What are you saying, Ellie?" She sighed, running a hand through her tousled hair. I look at what this is doing to your career, to mine. Maybe we were naive to think we could make this work." I felt a cold fear grip my heart. Are you breaking up with me? No, Ellie said quickly, reaching for my hand. God, no, I love you, Margaret, but I can't help wondering if we're being selfish, if we're risking too much. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Ellie, listen to me. What we have, it's rare. It's beautiful. And yes, it's complicated and messy, and it's causing us both a lot of pain right now. But it's real, and I'm not willing to give that up. Are you? Ellie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. No, she whispered, I'm not. We held each other that night, clinging to our love like a lifeline in a stormy sea. The next morning, as I was making coffee, my phone rang. It was Jack. My hand trembled as I answered. Hello, Margaret. His voice oozed false sympathy. I hope I'm not interrupting anything intimate. I gritted my teeth. What do you want, Jack? He chuckled, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, I think you know what I want. This little scandal of yours has given me quite the leverage. I'm prepared to drop the lawsuit, for a price. And what price is that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Everything, he said simply. The rights to your previous books, a significant cut of your future earnings, and a public statement that your relationship with your editor influenced the quality of your work. Admit that I was the real creative force behind your success. I felt a white-hot rage building inside me. You're out of your mind, Jack. I'll never agree to that. Think about it, Margaret, he said, his voice hardening. You have a lot to lose. Your reputation, your career, your precious Ellie's future. Don't be foolish. The line went dead, leaving me shaking with anger and fear. When I told Ellie about Jack's ultimatum, I expected her to be devastated. Instead, a fire blazed in her eyes, reminiscent of the passionate editor I'd first fallen for. Enough, she said, her voice steely with determination. We're not going to let Jack or anyone else dictate our lives. It's time we fought back. As we sat at my kitchen table, plotting our next move, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead was still treacherous, but with Ellie by my side, I was ready to face whatever came our way. Little did we know, our greatest challenge and our greatest triumph was just around the corner. The week following Jack's ultimatum was a whirlwind of activity. Ellie and I threw ourselves into our plan with a fervor born of desperation and love. We reached out to every contact we had in the publishing world, gathering evidence of Jack's manipulative behavior and my independent creative process. Late one night, as we pored over old emails and drafts, Ellie suddenly sat up straight, her eyes wide. Margaret, she breathed. Look at this. She pointed to an email thread from years ago, buried deep in my archives. It was a conversation between Jack and his friend, a small-time literary agent. In it, Jack boasted about how he was going to ride his wife's coattails to success, and detailed his plans to claim credit for my work. I felt a surge of vindication and rage. This is it, I said, my voice shaking. This is what we need to expose him. Ellie nodded, a fierce gleam in her eye. It's time to end this, once and for all. The next morning, we marched into Heartland Publishing, armed with our evidence and a steely determination. The meeting that followed was intense, filled with raised voices and heated arguments. But by the end, we had the full support of the publishing house behind us. Press conferences were arranged, statements were prepared, and legal teams were mobilized. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. But through it all, Ellie was my constant, my anchor in the storm. The day of the press conference dawned bright and clear. As I stood at the podium, Ellie by my side, I felt a calm settle over me. I looked out at the sea of reporters, cameras flashing, and took a deep breath. Thank you all for coming, I began. I'm here today to set the record straight about several issues that have been circulating in the media. I detailed Jack's attempts at blackmail, his false claims to my work, and the evidence we had uncovered. As I spoke, I could see the shock and outrage rippling through the crowd. Furthermore, I continued, my voice growing stronger, I want to address the matter of my relationship with Ellie Sinclair. I turned to look at her, drawing strength from her unwavering gaze. Yes, we are in a relationship. Yes, it began while she was my editor. But our personal connection has only enhanced our professional collaboration, pushing both of us to new heights of creativity and excellence. I paused, letting my words sink in. Love isn't something to be ashamed of or to hide. It's something to be celebrated in all its forms. Ellie and I may have found each other in an unconventional way, but our love is real, and it's made both of us better, as people and as professionals. The room erupted in a flurry of questions, but I felt lighter than I had in months. Ellie squeezed my hand, a proud smile on her face. The aftermath of the press conference was beyond anything we could have imagined. Jack's lawsuit crumbled in the face of the evidence we presented. The public, initially scandalized by our relationship, rallied behind us, touched by our story of love conquering adversity. Heartland Publishing, recognizing the potential in our narrative, fast-tracked my book for release. They even suggested a companion piece, a joint memoir by Ellie and me, detailing our journey from editor and author to partners in love and life. As the dust settled, Ellie and I found ourselves in a new normal. We were no longer hiding, no longer fighting. We were simply us. One lazy Sunday morning about a year after the press conference, I woke to find Ellie's side of the bed empty. Puzzled, I padded out to the living room of our shared apartment. I found her on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise over Omaha. She turned as I approached, and my breath caught at the love shining in her eyes. "Good morning, beautiful," she said softly, opening her arms to me. I nestled against her, breathing in her familiar scent. "What are you doing up so early?" Ellie was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "I was just thinking about everything we've been through, how far we've come." I nodded, remembering the turmoil of the past year. "It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" "It has," Ellie agreed. Then, to my surprise, she pulled away slightly, turning to face me. And I was thinking, maybe it's time for a new chapter. Before I could ask what she meant, Ellie reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped as she dropped to one knee. "Margaret," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you've been my author, my friend, my lover, and my partner through the craziest year of our lives. Will you do me the honor of being my wife?" Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, unable to speak. Ellie slipped the ring onto my finger, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. As we kissed, the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was where I belonged. This was my happily ever after. Our story, which had begun in the pages of a manuscript, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. And as Ellie and I stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that the best chapters of our life together were still to come. The end. Or perhaps, just the beginning.